Good morning, class 11. So in the last video I have explained up to page number 15. So today we will be discussing page number 16, 17 and 18. So let's start. I will explain line by line. So by morning on January 3, the pumps had the water level sufficiently under control for us to take 2 hours rest in rotation. But we still had a tremendous leak somewhere below the water line, and on checking I found that nearly all the boat's main reef frames were smashed down to the keel. And in fact there was nothing holding up a whole section of the starboard hull except a few cupboard partitions. And we had survived for 15 hours since the wave hit, but wave walker wouldn't hold together long enough for us to reach Australia. I checked out charts and calculated that there are two small islands a few hundred kilometers to the east. One of them, Lee Amsterdam, was a French scientific base, and our only hope was to reach these pinpricks in the vast ocean. But unless the wind and seas abated so we could host sail, our chances would be slim indeed. There was the great wave had put our auxiliary engine out of action. So auxiliary engine means secondary engine, a small secondary engine used to board ships to operate a windlass in the ship. So here the water levels was under control by the morning of January 3, and all of them took 2 hour rest in rotation, but there was a leak somewhere below in water line, and they have checked it, and upon checking the boat reef structure was badly broken down till the base of the ship, and the whole section of starboard was held together with a few cupboard partitions, right? And the ship's condition was so bad that it would not make it till Australia. So the narrator checked the charts and calculated that there were two small islands a few kilometers away to the east, and one of them was Lee Amsterdam, which was a French scientific base. And their only hope was to search and reach that island, but the wind and the sea do not cause further damage. If according to them, if the wind and the sea do not cause any further damage, they have chances, right, to reach there. And the wave had destroyed their ship's auxiliary engine, right? Here pinpricks in the vast ocean. See the expression pinpricks in the vast ocean. That means two small islands like pinpricks, like a small tiffin cake, right? In the vast ocean were very tiny, like the prick caused by a pin, right? Now on January 4, after 36 hours of continuous pumping, we reached the last few centimeters of water. Now we had only to keep pace with the water still coming in, and we could not set any sail on the main mast. Pressure on the rigging would simply pull the damaged section of the hull apart, so we hoisted the storm jeep and headed for where I thought the two islands were. Mary found some corned beef and crackers biscuit and we ate our first meal in almost 2 days. But our respite was short lived. At 4 p.m., black clouds began building up behind us, and within the hour, the wind was back to 40 knots, and the seas were getting higher. The weather continued to deteriorate throughout the night, and by dawn on January 5, our situation was again desperate. So here in this part, after 36 hours of continuous pumping, on January 4, the water was only a few centimeters left to be pumped out, right? But they still had to pump out the water which was coming in, and they could not set sail on the mainmast. And they and and they had their first meal in 2 days with some corned beef and cracker biscuit, and that's found by Mary. Now, and we also found that the rest period was short lived because the black clouds built up around 4 p.m. and the wind was now 40 knots and the sea was getting higher and the weather got worse, and by the early morning of the January 5 the situation was become very bad. When I went in to comfort the children, John asked, "Daddy, are we going to die?" I tried to assure him that we could make it. "But Daddy," he went on, "we aren't afraid of dying if we can all be together. You and Mummy, Sue means Susanne, and I." I could find no words with which to respond, but I left the children's cabin determined to fight the sea with everything I had. To protect the weakened starboard side, I decided to have to with the undamaged port hull facing the oncoming waves, using an improvised sea anchor of heavy nylon rope and two 22-liter plastic barrels of paraffin. And that evening, Mary and I sat together holding hands as the motion of the sea brought more and more water in through the broken planks. We both felt the end was very near. So, when the narrator went to comfort his children, his son asked him whether they were going to die, and he tried to assure him that they would make it. His son replied that they were not afraid to die till they all were together. And this filled the narrator with a determination to fight back. He made efforts to protect the weakened starboard, and he used an improvised sea anchor made of heavy nylon rope and two 22-liter plastic barrels of kerosene. Right, paraffin means kerosene, right? And the same evening, the narrator and his wife sat holding hands, and they believed that their end was very near. But Webwalker rode out the storm, and by the morning of January 6, with the wind essaying, I tried to get a reading on the sextant. Back in the chart room, I walked on wind speed, changes of course, drift and current in an effort to calculate our position. The best I could determine was that we were somewhere in 150,000 kilometers of oceans looking for the 65-kilometer wide island. And while I was thinking, Sue, moving painfully, joined me. The left side of her head was now very swollen, and her back and blackened eyes narrowed to slits. She gave me a card she had made. Right. And on the front, she had drawn caricatures of Mary and me with the words, "Here are some funny people. Did they make you love?" I loved a lot as well. Inside was a message, "Oh, how I love you both." So, this card is to say thank you and let's hope for the best. Somehow we had to make it. So, here the ship made it through the storm, and by the morning of January 6, the narrator tried to get reading on the sextant. Sextant is an instrument with you know graduated of 60 degrees for taking altitudes and navigations. So he worked with wind speeds, drift and current and calculate their positions, and they found that they were in the 150,000 kilometer area of ocean looking for a 65-kilometer wide island. While the narrator was still thinking, his daughter Sue joined him and she was in pain. The left side of her head was swollen and her blackened eyes had narrowed down to slits. She gave him a card which she had made herself. And on the front of the card was a cartoon image of her parents with words written about them being funny people and how they made her laugh. And on the another side of the card she told them how she loved them both and she thanked them. And this made the narrator realize that they had to make it to the island. Now in page number 17, I checked and rechecked my calculations. We had lost our main compass and I was using a sphere which has not been corrected for magnetic variation. I made an allowance for this and another estimate of the influence of the westerly currents which flow through this part of the Indian Ocean. Around 2 p.m. I went on deck and asked Larry to steer a course of 185 degrees. If we were lucky, I told him with a conviction I would not feel I could expect to see the island at about 5 p.m. Then with a heavy heart I went below, climbed on my bunk and amazingly dozed off, and when I woke it was 6 p.m. and growing dark. I knew we must have missed the island, and with the sail we had left and we couldn't hope to beat back into the westerly winds. And at that moment a tousled head appeared by my bunk. "Can I have a hug?" Jonathan asked. Sue was right behind him. So here we found that the narrator rechecked his calculations, and there he found that they lost their main compass and they were using the spare one which was not corrected for magnetic variation. And he estimated the influence of the westerly currents which flow through the Indian Ocean, and around 2 p.m. he went on deck and asked Larry to steer the wheel to 185 degree, and he felt if they were lucky they would see the island by 5 p.m. And then he went below and slept. And when he woke up around 6 p.m. it was dark outside, and he thought that they might have missed the island, and he started worrying about how they would tackle the westerly wind more as the ship was not capable to sail more. And his son came and he asked him for a hug. His daughter followed, right? Now see, why am I getting a hug now? I asked. Because you are the best daddy in the whole world and the best captain, my son replied. Not today, John, I am afraid. Why, you must be, said Sue in the matter of fact voice. You found the island. What? I shouted. It's out there in front of us, they chorused, as big as a battleship. I rushed on deck and gazed the relief at the stark outline of Lee Amsterdam, and it was only a bleak piece of volcanic rock with little vegetation, the most beautiful island in the world. So the author asked his son why he was getting hugged. His son replied that he was the best daddy in this world, and he also called him the best captain. Then the narrator replied that he was afraid. Then his daughter told him that they had found the island, which was as big as the battleship. Right. Then in the last page, page number 18, we anchored offshore for the night, and the next morning all 28 inhabitants of the island cheered as they helped us ashore. With the land under my feet again, my thoughts were full of Larry and Harvey, cheerful and optimistic under the direst stress, and of Mary, who stayed at the wheel for all those crucial hours. Most of all, I thought of a 7-year-old girl who did not want us to worry about a head injury, which subsequently took 6 minor operations to remove a recurring blood clot between the skin and skull, and a 6-year-old boy who was not afraid to die. So they moved the ship at some distance from the shore, and the next morning 28 inhabitants of the Amsterdam island helped them to move on the shore of the land, and the author felt the land again on his feet, and he thought of his crewman and his wife, and he also thought of his 7-year-old daughter who was injured badly during the fight, and he had to go through 6 minor operations to remove the blood clot in her head. And the author was thinking about his son who never gave up and was not afraid to die. Right? So this is the story all about. So I have explained the text and I have completed it. Now it's your work to read out the text carefully, thoroughly, and understanding the text. List the steps taken by the captain, then understanding and then talking about the text. These are some exercise based questions. Try to write the answer of these questions, right? So